Chapter 81 Weaver's Eye. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 81 Weaver's Eye. Sunny blinked. You have received a memory. Drop of ichor. Wait a moment, wait a moment. A great devil. He gulped. Nightmare creature with 4 soul cores was called a devil, just one class below the dreaded tyrant. From that detail alone, the evil ancient egg had been potentially more powerful than the carapace demon. However, what shocked him the most was its rank, not class. The quality of most things having to do with the nightmare spell followed a similar hierarchy, from dormant to awakened, ascended, transcendent, supreme, sacred and divine. Humans had only ever managed to reach the transcendent rank. These heroes were known as saints, each wielding an unimaginable amount of power and leading humanity in its war against the nightmare creatures. The nightmare creatures, too, were different from each other in a similar fashion, with 7 ranks of power. They were, in order of growing strength: dormant, awakened, fallen, corrupted, great, cursed and unholy. A great devil, therefore, was a nightmare creature with 4 soul cores, each one of the great rank. Which were the same in terms of power as a supreme soul core would have been if a human ever managed to pass the 4th nightmare and rise one step above the saints. Sunny had just killed one of the most powerful nightmare creatures to ever fall by a human hand. At least as far as he knew. Victories against the great devils were rare enough to be of historic importance. What a stroke of luck, to find one absolutely defenseless, yet to be fully born and weakened by thousands of years of neglect. Not to mention the fact that he was probably the only human alive to be partially immune to the egg's terrifying life-sucking powers. Wait, how many shadow fragments did I get? Sunny felt stronger, a lot stronger. He was used to receiving 2 fragments for each awakened beast he killed. Thus, it was fair to assume that a fallen beast would give him 4, a corrupted beast would give him 8, and a great beast would give him 16, forgetting the ridiculousness of the notion that a sleeper would ever be able to slay a great beast. However, the vile thieving bird spawn was not a beast, it was a devil. It had 4 cores, so, 60.4 fragments. Dumbstruck, Sunny summoned the runes. In his excited state, he even disregarded the insistent forgetfulness that prevented him from doing so earlier. Shadow fragments. 196/1000. After seeing the number, he was giddy with joy at first. But then, Sunny frowned. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. I had 90.6 fragments before coming to the Ashen Barrow. I received 60.4 just now, that makes it 160. Where did the additional 30.6 fragments come from? From the fruits. No way, we've been eating them for less than a week, 1 fruit a day. To get that much, a whole month would have to pass. But how could so much time pass without him noticing? Yes, his memory was strange lately, but... Sunny tried to concentrate on the discrepancy, but it was very hard, for some reason. The more he thought about it, the less clear he became on what exactly he was thinking about. What was I trying to remember? Something about the shadow fragments. Yeah. A few minutes later, he massaged his temples and sighed in frustration. I guess I was trying to calculate how many fragments I got from killing that vile egg. It's 60.4. What is there to think about? That is great. He would spend more time celebrating the insane amount of shadow fragments he had received, but there was another amazing thing waiting for his attention. A memory. He had actually received a memory from a great devil. A real, actual supreme memory of the 4th tier. That was fantastic. Sunny summoned the runes once more and looked at his memories. Memories. Silver Bell, Puppeteer's Shroud, Midnight Shard, Drop of Ichor. Hurriedly, he concentrated on the new one. Memory. Drop of Ichor. Memory rank. Unknown memory type. Unknown memory description. The loathsome thieving bird was hated both by the gods and unknown. However, it only cared about shiny things. Enamored by Weaver's beautiful eyes, it stole one of them on a dark, starless night. Impatient, the vile creature looked at its bounty while still in flight. However, when it saw the reflection of unknown, forever frozen in the depths of Weaver's pupil, it went mad and screamed, dropping the eye on the mortal realm below. All that was left in its greedy beak was one drop of pure, golden ichor. Sunny frowned. What the hell was that? He had never heard of a memory with an unknown rank and type. How was this even possible? Did the spell really not know, or was it simply refusing to let him know? Why would it do that? And the description itself, what were these words that it failed to translate? He tried to forego the automatic translation and look at the runes themselves, but they were beyond his ability to translate. In fact, he had never seen runes of this type before. Weirdly, studying them caused him to feel dizzy and nauseated. That is, very, very weird. Also, to his shame, Sunny had to admit that he had no idea what the word ichor meant. It simply wasn't in his vocabulary. Maybe if he went to school and got an education like other sleepers, he would know. Sunny hesitated for a minute or two, then cautiously summoned the strange memory. Instantly, golden sparks of light appeared in the air in front of him, coalescing into a spherical drop of radiant, golden liquid. What am I supposed to do with tea? Before he finished his thought, the spell spoke again. Its voice sounded a bit strange. It was almost excited. You have acquired a drop of ichor. Do you wish to consume it? Sunny blinked. Consume a memory. Things were getting weirder and weirder. He hesitated. What was going to happen if he did consume it? Memories were rewards given by the spell to the awakened. As such, they were usually useful, very rarely useless, and never harmful. At least that was the common knowledge. However, this one was out of the ordinary. And it was the spell he was talking about. The damn thing was nothing if not unpredictable, usually with catastrophic consequences. The safest approach would be to put the golden liquid back into his soul sea and never touch it again. But it was a memory received from a great devil. Chances were he would never hold another one in his whole life, not even in his dreams. Sunny was simply unwilling to let this opportunity go. Trying to calm his rapidly beating heart, he licked his lips and said, "Yes. I want to consume it." "As you wish." The golden sphere separated into two streams of beautiful, radiant liquid. The streams flowed through the air, approaching Sunny's face. He felt a gentle touch caress his cheeks. Then, the golden liquid reached his eyes and flowed through them, entering his soul through the pupils. Soon, it was gone. Sunny was frozen, not knowing what to expect. A second passed, then another. He raised his trembling hands to his face, finally feeling something. In the next moment, Sunny opened his mouth and let out a terrible, wailing shriek as unimaginable, blinding pain tore through his entire being. Chapter 82 Fear of the Unknown. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny fell into the soft embrace of spiderwebs, screaming, his whole body convulsing in spasms of terrible pain. The unbearable agony radiated through his nervous system, his mind drowning in the endless torrent of torturous, excruciating, harrowing suffering. It felt as though every muscle, every fiber, every molecule of his body was being torn apart and reassembled, only to be torn apart again. His eyes, especially, felt as though there were two white-hot metal rods inserted in them, making all the other pain pale in comparison. Or maybe they had become searing spheres of molten metal themselves. He clawed at his face, leaving bloody marks on it. However, seconds later they were already gone, erased by some unknown force. His voice was soon gone, too, leaving Sunny without an outlet to express his horrible torment. The process was the opposite of the gentle rebirth he had experienced after passing the first nightmare. It was violent, ruthless and unnatural, forcefully reshaping Sunny's body into something that it was not meant to be. That nothing was ever meant to be. Powerless to stop it, Sunny had no choice but to endure the agony. All he could do was try not to go mad from pain. Tears were streaming down his face, leaving bloody trails in their wake. There was no end to torture. Then, after what felt like an eternity, there was. The pain subsided, lessened, and finally vanished. Sunny was left lying on the thick carpet of spiderwebs, utterly drained and depleted. In the silence that was broken only by the hoarse sound of his ragged breathing, the spell's voice whispered. You have acquired a new attribute. One of your attributes is ready to evolve. Sunny remained motionless for a long time, slowly coming back to his senses. The memory of the terrible ordeal was still echoing in his mind, making him shudder from time to time. He was afraid to open his eyes and look at his body, afraid to see himself changed in some horrific, repulsive way. Have I become a monster? Feeling a sense of dread, Sunny shut his eyes tighter. However, he did not feel like a monster. In fact, he didn't feel different at all. From what he could tell, he still had 2 hands, 2 legs, and soft human skin. There was no change in his strength and resilience. It was as though nothing had happened. Come on. Just do it. With a nervous sigh, Sunny opened his eyes and looked himself over. Everything was the same. He shifted his perception and studied himself again through the shadow. He was still human. Well, something did change, but he couldn't quite describe it. It was as though his vision was slightly different from before. The world seemed deeper, somehow. Sunny only noticed the difference because of the contrast between his own perception and that of the shadow. Previously, they were more or less similar. A drop of ichor, that came from the weaver's eye. Carefully, he raised a hand and touched his eyes. They felt the same. But they were also different. He just couldn't understand in what way. Lowering his hand, Sunny noticed a drop of blood on one of his fingers. It came from a small scratch on his cheek, one that had not healed like the others. Deep inside his blood, Sunny noticed a barely visible hint of the golden shine. As if the radiant drop of golden liquid he had absorbed was still there, now a part of him, strongly diluted and fused into his own bloodstream. The shine was so faint that he had almost missed it. Sunny suspected that in the light, it wouldn't be visible at all. What, the hell, have I done to myself? That was the moment when he accidentally glanced at the Pupitar's shroud, simultaneously thinking about the golden shine. Something switched in Sunny's head, and suddenly, he saw the memory differently. His eyes widened. Under the surface of the gray fabric, 5 glowing embers were shining with ethereal light. Each of them represented a nexus and anchor of countless diamond strings that stretched to different parts of the armor, weaving an intricate, elaborate, unpredictable pattern. It looked a lot like the inner void of the spell, only at an infinitely smaller scale. However, Sunny was surprised to find out that he sort of understood the pattern. A newly found innate knowledge helped him sense the traces of logic behind the seemingly chaotic placement of the strings, a defined purpose behind every twist and turn. They were meant to achieve certain effects, durability, resilience, and another, more complex type of protection. The hint of understanding came naturally to him, as though it was his innate ability. I need to study this further. Intrigued and apprehensive, he entered the Soul Sea. A familiar dark expanse of still water appeared in front of his mind's eye. There was the looming shadow core, the shining satellites of his memories, and the strange feeling that something was moving just beyond the periphery of his vision. Out of habit, Sunny turned his head to try and catch sight of that something, knowing that he would not see anything. However, this time, he did. With a startled yelp, Sunny flinched away and lost his balance. What the hell? What the actual hell? Out there in the darkness, at the border of the dim light cast by the shining memories, stood motionless black figures. They were shadows, shadows of creatures he had killed. There was a shadow that resembled the slave with broad shoulders and bloodied back, one whose name Sunny had never bothered to learn. His figure was deformed and horrifying, as he had been transformed into a murderous beast after becoming the host of a mountain king's larva. That larva was then strangled by Sunny. The shadow of the mountain king itself was towering above him, just as dreadful and abhorrent as the tyrant had been when still alive. Sunny shuddered as he remembered escaping from the horrid creature's claws. The shadow of the cruel slaver that had hit him with the whip was also there, standing beside the tyrant. This was the first, and for now the only, human whose life Sunny had ended with his own 2 hands. He even stole the boots and cloak of the dead man's body. On both sides of them, there were other shadows. Hulking carapace scavengers stood silently, their pincers lowered to the ground. A fearsome centurion's savage silhouette could be seen among them, surrounded by the giant centipedes, bulbous knots of carnivorous worms and a few strange, man-eating flowers. Every single being that had fallen by Sunny's hand was there in the form of a shadow. Or, to be more precise, every being whose shadow's fragments had been absorbed by him. Despite the fact that shadows had no eyes, he couldn't help but feel that they were all staring at him. Silent, motionless. Watching. Feeling cold shivers running down his spine, Sunny gulped and stood up, his legs shaking a little. Finding out that a small army of dead shadows had appeared inside your soul's sea was not the most pleasant of surprises. Let alone if those shadows once belonged to creatures who you had personally slain. He clenched his teeth. Can I repeat, what the actual hell? Chapter 83-5 You are listening at novelfull.audio. The shadows stared at Sunny, and Sunny stared at the shadows. After a while, the situation became a bit awkward. Sunny shifted a little, then hesitantly asked. Are you guys not going to do anything? The shadows did not react, remaining as motionless and quiet as they had been from the start. As a matter of fact, he didn't see them move or show any sign of life at all. In that regard, they were even more lifeless than his echo had been here in the Sea of Soul. Sunny scratched his head. His initial fear was slowly disappearing. At first, he was scared out of his wits, but more so from being startled than from feeling an actual threat. This was his soul sea, after all. Very few things could harm him here. Sunny was pretty sure that the shadows were not capable of doing anything, let alone attacking him. They seemed more like manifestations of some weird facet of his aspect rather than actual beings. As such, they weren't dangerous. The question was, why did the shadows suddenly appear? After briefly thinking about it, Sunny came to the conclusion that they did not actually appear, per se. Instead, they were always here, it's just that he had not been able to see them. But now, with his eyes changed by the strange transformation he had gone through, he could, just like he could see the diamond strings inside the puppeteer's shroud. Speaking of the puppeteer's shroud. Glancing at the silent shadows one last time to make sure that they would not lunge at him, Sunny frowned with suspicion and turned away. His back instantly began to tingle. Just think of them as fashionable pieces of furniture. Who says soul seas don't need a touch of interior design? Somewhat consoled, he walked closer to the shining spheres that represented memories and summoned the puppeteer's shroud. One of the spheres floated down and slowly dimmed, revealing the armor within. Just like before, Sunny could see 5 glowing nexuses and countless strings permeating the gray fabric. They resembled miniature stars assembled into a constellation. The shroud came from a tyrant, which is a class of nightmare creatures with 5 soul cores. 5 soul cores, 5th tier memory, 5 nexuses, makes sense. For some reason, the number 5 moved something in his mind. Sunny scowled, not understanding the feeling of unease that suddenly appeared out of nowhere and disrupted the flow of his thoughts. Trying to concentrate on the task at hand, he summoned the runes describing the puppeteer's shroud. The familiar description appeared in the air around the armor. Memory. Puppeteer's shroud. Memory rank. Awakened. Memory tier. V. Memory type. Armor. Memory description. A worm of doubt, the identification of the tear was new. It seems that the spell decided to be helpful and incorporated Sunny's new understanding of the inner workings of memories into its interface. Tears were not something that humans had learned from the spell. Instead, it was just an improvised way of differentiating memories of different power levels within the same rank. It was often unreliable and outright wrong, but it was better than nothing. But in the case of Sunny, the information was 100% true. He could confirm it with his own 2 eyes just by counting the number of core remnants inside a memory. He could even understand their purpose. That might be extremely useful. However, his attention was drawn to something else. At the very bottom of the description, a new cluster of runes appeared. Memory enchantments. Enhanced durability, doubtless. Sunny smiled. That was what he was hoping for. Previously, he had only been able to intuitively sense the special qualities of his memories, with no way to learn their true nature and limits except for the trial and error approach. And using that method during a battle was not conducive to survival. Now, however, he concentrated on one of the enchantments. Enchantment. Doubtless. Enchantment description. Provides the wearer with a small amount of protection against mind attacks. Good to know. The amount was small because it was just an awakened memory. Since enhanced durability was self-explanatory, Sunny dismissed the puppeteer's shroud and summoned the silver bell. The small bell had only one spark of light, which was much less bright than the ones inside the puppeteer's shroud, at that. Studying the runes did not show anything interesting. It was a Tier 1 dormant memory with a single enchantment that increased the range at which its ringing could be heard to several kilometers. Finally, it was time to take a look at the Midnight Shard. The graceful blade appeared in front of Sunny in all its austere beauty. Memory. Midnight Shard. Memory rank. Awakened. Memory tier. 3. Memory description. Forged from the shard of a fallen star, this stalwart blade is firm and unyielding. It favors those who are willing to fight to the last drop of blood and knows no surrender. Memory enchantments. Unbroken. Enchantment description. This blade refuses to be broken, and thus is durable beyond reason. It will greatly enhance the power of its wielder when they are close to death, however only if the wielder is unwilling to surrender. Sunny sighed, simultaneously satisfied and disappointed. Now he knew how to access the well of power that hid in the deepest parts of his heart when the Midnight Shard was in his hand. However, it could only be done when he was at the death's door, wounded and minutes away from perishing. It could either save him from a dire situation or create an opportunity for a very heroic last stand. Sunny did not care for heroics, so the second option did not seem appealing at all. The first one was much more useful, but only in the case of him screwing up terribly and getting himself in a lethal amount of trouble. In other words, it could only be used if he failed. In normal battles, the special qualities of the Midnight Shard were of no use at all. A pity. But, an ace in your sleeve in case things really go south is not bad either. Done with his memories, Sunny was ready to learn of the new attribute he had received. Considering how much pain he had to go through to acquire the damn thing, he had pretty high expectations. Looking for the cluster of runes representing his attributes, Sunny focused his attention and carefully read their names. There were 5 attributes. Fated, Mark of Divinity, Child of Shadows, and the new one, Blood Weave. Sunny was about to summon the description of the Blood Weave, but then stopped. Something was not right. Something did not add up. The feeling of unease from before had returned, now much stronger. When did he first feel it? For some reason, his thoughts were slow and murky. He felt a strong inclination to forget all about the strange feeling and concentrate on something else. But this time, he did not. It was, when I was studying the puppeteer's shroud. And it was, connected, to the number 5. 5. What meaning was there to the number 5? With his attention beginning to wane, Sonny bit his lip, causing drops of blood to roll down. A burst of pain cleared his mind for a moment. There were 5 attributes. Fated, Mark of Divinity, Child of Shadows, and Blood Weave. What? There were 5 attributes. But he only counted 4. Bewildered, Sonny stared at the runes. He was sure that there was a 5th attribute. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't read its name and description. Every time his gaze fell on the runes corresponding to the 5th attribute, he would find himself distracted, his memory wiped clean of any mention of it. Just remembering that there were 5 attributes was incredibly hard. Clenching his teeth, Sonny tried to keep his concentration, not allowing himself to be distracted. He was not going to forget. 5. It's 5. There's 5 of them, damn it. Immediately after he said those words out loud, something changed. It was as though an invisible veil had fallen from his eyes. Or, rather, from his mind. Sonny froze, shock and fear permeating his heart. He was remembering. Didn't I see a dream? Yes, of course, he saw Cassie standing over him with panic in her eyes. Begging him to remember the number 5. No, wait. Was that a dream? At the time, he believed so. But then, he forgot. Just as he had forgotten what actually happened on that day. On the day when Cassie woke him up to tell him something important. Chapter 84 Black Seed. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It happened on the day they killed the Carapace demon. Back then, all 3 of them were utterly exhausted. After moving away from the corpse of the giant creature and finding a good hiding spot, they fell to the ground and immediately fell asleep. But they didn't stay asleep for long. An hour or 2 later, Sonny was shaken awake by Cassie, who was holding him by the shoulders. There was an expression of terror written clearly on her face. Sonny. Sonny. Wake up. Instantly coming back to his senses, he jumped to his feet and summoned the Midnight Shard, afraid that they were under attack. However, there was no one around except for panicked Cassie and wary Nephice, who was in a similar pose, her sword raised and ready to strike. Confused, Sonny looked at the blind girl. Cassie. What's the matter? Grabbing him by the shoulders again, she brought her face close and whispered in a begging tone. Sonny, you have to stop it. Please. You are the only one who can. He frowned, failing to understand what exactly he was supposed to stop. Did she see another vision? Trying to calm her, he said in a measured tone. It's all right, Cassie. Slow down, breathe. Tell us what happened. Start from the beginning. She desperately shook her head. There's no time. I will forget soon. We all will. But you have to remember. We will all forget soon. What does she mean? Not able to see Sonny's dazed expression, Cassie yelled. You have to remember, Sonny. 5. It's 5. Remember. You have to remember. It's 5. Remember, 5. The blind girl was not making any sense. Sonny carefully put his arm around her, feeling how scared she was from her shaking body. All right, Cass. I promise I'll remember. 5, right. See, it's pretty hard to forget. Nephice was looking at them with a frown, not neglecting to scan the surroundings for any signs of danger from time to time. For some reason, Cassie was only talking to Sonny, not paying her any attention. What was it that she thought Sonny could do, but Changing Star could not? Hearing his answer, the blind girl calmed down a little. However, she was still terrified. Good. Good. Remember, it's 5. You promised. Her voice sounded quieter and quieter, as though she was not sure of what she was saying. Sunny was barely able to discern her mumbling. The more complex a thought, the harder it will be to hold on to it. That's why I can only tell you this one word, the simplest thing to impart. When the right time comes, it might change things. Carefully choosing his words, Sunny hesitantly asked. Cassie. Can you tell us what happened, exactly? Hearing his voice, the blind girl flinched and raised her head to face him. There were still traces of fear in her eyes, but mostly, it had been replaced by confusion. Huh? Did something happen? Sunny blinked. Wasn't she the one who woke them up in a panic? Wait, why did she wake us up? To begin with, for some reason, he had trouble remembering the details of the past few minutes. The conversation they just had was already hazy in his memory. I guess I'm still groggy from waking up so abruptly. Lack of sleep affects concentration. You wanted to tell us something. It had to do with the, number 5. Cassie raised her eyebrows. 5. Why 5? Sunny didn't know what to say. He was going to ask the same question. I have no clue. Perplexed, he looked at Nephise, hoping that she will be able to clear the situation. Changing Star was standing a few steps away with a distracted expression on her face. Sensing his gaze, she stared at him and asked. Why do you have your sword out? Sunny glanced at the midnight shard and tried to remember what had caused him to summon the memory. I'm not sure. Why did you summon yours? Nephise looked down, as though noticing the sword in her hands for the first time. An expression of doubt appeared on her face. What's wrong with our heads today? Understanding that it was pointless to expect help from Nephise, Sunny sighed and turned back to Cassie. Did you see another vision? The blind girl trembled. Her eyes opened wide, once again filled with fear. A vision, yes, I saw a vision. An awful, awful vision. What did you see? She was silent for a few moments, trying to remember. A deep frown appeared on her face. Finally, Cassie quietly said. I saw a mountain of corpses. Countless bodies piled on each other until they formed a blood-soaked hill. And at the top of it, a tiny black seed was floating in a pool of blood. She grew silent, then continued. That was the past, I think. But then I saw the future, a future. It was us. Oh, gods. We were. Her voice trembled. As though not daring to say something aloud, Cassie stopped. Sunny waited for a while, then carefully asked. We were what? The blind girl turned to him in confusion. What? He scratched the back of his head. What were they just talking about? You were, telling us about your vision. I think. Cassie frowned. What vision? To his embarrassment, Sunny wasn't sure either. He just remembered something about the number 5 and a seed. For some reason, he felt as though that number was very important. But why? He had no idea. I forgot. Suddenly, Nephise, who was standing nearby, lowered her hands and dismissed the sword that she had been holding for some reason. Looking at them with a bit of confusion, she hesitantly asked. Why are you guys awake? We need to rest. Something might get attracted by the demon's corpse, so we'd better return to peak condition as soon as possible. Distracted and already forgetting about the conversation with Cassie, Sunny blinked a couple of times, shrugged, and decided to go back to sleep. None of this made sense anyway. They were probably struck dumb by exhaustion. He felt so tired. A few hours later, when the shadow noticed the winged creature circling around the island, he awoke again. By that time, the memory of Cassie's warning was so fragmented and hazy that it seemed like a strange dream. But the seed was already planted deep into his subconscious. And now that it had blossomed, Sunny was finally able to fight through the haze of oblivion and remember everything. Chapter 85 One Step at a Time. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sitting inside the vile thieving bird's nest, Sonny frowned and clenched his fists. Something unnatural was happening to them ever since they came to the Ashen Barrow. Now that he had remembered Cassie's warning, it was apparent that their minds were affected, making them forgetful and easily distracted. Even now that he knew about it, thinking straight was strangely hard. It took all of his will just to keep the knowledge of the anomaly in his memory. The events of these past few days were still hazy. Remembering something else, Sonny closed his eyes in frustration. Had they really spent mere days on this island? The number of shadow fragments he received from eating soul tree fruits suggested otherwise. It was quite possible that as much as a whole month had passed since the first time they ate them. And their minds were corroded a bit more with every day that passed. Pretty soon, there would be nothing left of them at all. Only empty shells, walking around wearing their faces. Sonny's face paled. With a growing feeling of dread, he realized that there were large gaps in his memory. He could not remember how they got to the Ashen Barrow, and where they were going. Other things, too, were unclear and blurry. Stay calm. Despite how compromised his memory was, there were still ways to understand what was going on, and then maybe undo it. After all, he was able to remember Cassie's warning. That meant that their memories were not gone, just obfuscated. First step. Resist the impulse to forget everything again. Not succumbing to the constant pull on his mind was not an easy task, but he was able to manage, at least for now. Second step. Try to understand the reason why you were able to remember these things. When Cassie begged him to remember the number 5, she must have already known that he would receive a new attribute. He had noticed the existence of the mysterious 5th attribute as the result, which triggered the frightening revelation. However, why was he able to not forget about the existence of the 5th attribute altogether? What made him so special? Cassie had even said that he was the only one who could do it. Why him and not Changing Star? Sonny massaged his temples. Then, a sudden realization came to him. Doubtless. One of the enchantments of the puppeteer's shroud was providing him with a small amount of resistance against mind attacks. That's why he was slightly less susceptible to the frightening forgetfulness that infected them on the Ashen Barrow. That was the reason why he had been the last one to agree to eat the miraculous fruits. Why he had often felt that things were wrong. He was also the only one who had managed to remember Cassie's warning, even if it took him a long time. Cassie knew about the puppeteer's shroud, and that's why she had chosen him instead of Nephis. Smart girl. So, their warped state was the result of a mind attack. But who could attack them on this desolate island? The answer was pretty obvious. That damned tree. Looking down, Sonny felt cold sweat running down his back. The soul tree was, in fact, a colossal, ancient and utterly horrifying nightmare creature. If he was right, then its power had to be simply unimaginable. He was afraid to even think about what its rank and class were. No wonder it was able to drain a whole area of the crimson labyrinth of all life. No wonder it was able to survive and thrive in this hellish place. Of all the horrors in this hell, it might have been the most terrifying. Finally, Sonny knew the reason why no other nightmare creature dared to approach the Ashen Barrow. Even monsters were afraid of the soul tree. Except for equally harrowing things that dwelled beneath the waves of the deep, dark sea. There was no way for them to destroy it. The soul tree was just too big, old, and powerful. For a moment, Sonny entertained the idea of setting it on fire, but quickly abandoned it. He would need a volcanic eruption or some sort of divine intervention to burn that colossus down. So, what to do? After thinking for some time, Sonny decided not to be hasty and move forward one step at a time. First, he had to know the exact situation with his attributes. Summoning the runes, he tried once again to read the description of the hidden 5th attribute. The result was the same. He knew it was there, but could not remember what it was no matter how much he tried. Figures. Confirming that it was still impossible for him to solve that mystery on his own, Sunny moved his attention to the Mark of Divinity. New runes appeared under its description. Mark of Divinity, Attribute Description. You bear a faint scent of divinity, as though someone briefly touched by it once, a long time ago. Mark of Divinity, is ready to evolve. Proceed. Not wasting time, Sunny said yes. Immediately, the name and the description of the attribute changed. The new runes read. Attribute. Spark of Divinity. Spark of Divinity, Attribute Description. Every fire starts from a spark. Somewhere deep within your soul, a radiant spark shines with divine light. He didn't feel any changes within himself. It seemed as though the question of whether or not he wanted to proceed was just a formality, and the attribute already evolved back when he had consumed the drop of ichor. My affiliation to divinity has increased. Neat. Although I'm not sure how it might be useful. Was that spark of divinity the reason why he was now able to see the inner workings of memories, as well as some other stuff like the shadows in his soul see? If so, was it a universal trait of all awakened with high divine affiliation, or just his? For some reason, Sunny felt that it was the latter option. He had received the drop of ichor from a being called Weaver, and then became able to see the strings that were weaved through the memories, giving them their unique qualities. It wasn't hard to see the connection. If this was true, did it mean that there were different kinds of divinity? And he inherited a small amount of a very special kind of divinity. Was Weaver even a deity? Every god he had heard about was named in a similar fashion. There was Shadow God, War God, well, that's it. He had never heard the names of any other god. However, Weaver's name was different. Maybe Weaver was not a deity at all. Maybe he, she, or it was actually one of the unknown. Sunny shook his head, feeling that he had almost allowed himself to get distracted and release the hold on his memory. He could not allow himself to go on tangents now. Concentrating, he looked at his new attribute, Blood Weave. Blood Weave, Attribute Description. You have inherited a part of Weaver's forbidden lineage. Your blood has been altered and imbued with odd tenacity. So, he would be less likely to bleed out in the future. That was a very nice enhancement. However, it did not help Sunny with his current situation. It was time for the next step. It was early morning when Sunny descended from the soul tree. However, he didn't bring any fruit with him. Walking over to sleeping Cassie, he took her by the shoulders and gently shook her awake. The irony of how this situation mirrored the one where Cassie had told Sunny to remember the number 5 was not lost on him. The blind girl slowly came to her senses and turned to face him with a sleepy, confused expression. Sunny. Why are you up so early? He hesitated, then said with a friendly smile, trying very hard to act as though everything was all right. Actually, I didn't sleep at all this night. Cassie frowned. Luckily, she could not see the sorry state he was in, nor the dried blood on his face. Really? Why? He shrugged. I decided to climb the soul tree and search for some fruits. But that's not very important. Hey, your aspect ability allows you to see other people's attributes, right? She nodded, still confused. Yes. You know this. Why? Sunny lingered, then said in a carefree tone. Can you take a look at mine? Chapter 86 Final clue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sunny's thought process was very simple. Honestly, in the state he was in, complex ideas that went against Soul Tree's indoctrination were almost impossible to hold on to. He was already at his limits just trying to remember what had happened in the giant nest. On his way down, Sunny had to bite himself several times, leaving bloody marks on his hands. Sharp pain cleared his mind for a few moments and gave him temporary relief from the constant pull of forgetfulness. Coincidentally, he was already noticing the effect Blood Weave was exerting on him. The bites only bled for a short while, quickly turning into scabs. The speed of coagulation of his blood was clearly enhanced. He also felt more energetic, his endurance substantially better than it had been before. Which made sense. The human body was a system where every part affected the other. A comprehensive improvement of one of these parts, especially one as important as blood, had to lead to a chain reaction of lesser improvements throughout the system. It seemed that he had severely underestimated the importance of his new attribute. Focus, idiot. No tangents. Gritting his teeth, Sonny concentrated on the task. He wanted to use Cassie's aspect ability to learn the truth of the hidden attribute. Her sight was different from his. Sonny could only see the information provided by the runes because it was a default function of the spell. He simply accessed that information with his mind. Cassie's sight, however, came from her aspect. Thus, even if their minds were compromised, it should not have affected her ability to see other people's attributes. She also had a high affinity to revelations and fate. So, there was a high chance that Cassie would be able to succeed where he had failed. Finally reaching the ground, Sonny woke the blind girl up and, after a short conversation, mentioned the attributes. Then, he carefully asked, "Can you take a look at mine?" Cassie was visibly confused by this question. "Can't you do it yourself?" Sonny smiled. "I can, but I think you'll be surprised when you see them." The blind girl hesitated, then shrugged. "All right. But if it turns out that you woke me up for nothing, I'll be pretty upset." "That was not very nice of you." She turned to face him and froze for a moment, as though staring into his eyes. "Fated, child of shadows, spark of divinity, wait, wasn't it, mark of divinity? I must have remembered wrong." Stopping for a second, Cassie shyly covered her mouth with her small hand and yawned. My memory has not been too good lately. Too much rest, I guess. Where was I? Oh, yes. Bloodweave, Where did this come from?" Sonny forced a chuckle. "This thing. From an egg. Anyway, is there something else?" Cassie blinked a couple of times. "An egg? Well, if you say so." Usually, an appearance of a new attribute was not something one would gloss over. But in the state she was in, Cassie's attention span was severely reduced, and her mental capacity was clouded. She just frowned for a second, then forgot all about the discrepancy. Sonny's heart, meanwhile, was beating like it was going to explode. With a fake smile frozen on his face, he waited for the blind girl's next words. They were going to decide whether or not he would be able to get to the bottom of things. And, therefore, find a way to rise from that bottom. With an absent-minded smile, Cassie said. "My mom makes the best eggs. What were we talking about?" "Right, your attributes. The last one is enthralled." "Wait, where did this?" Knowing that there was very little time, Sonny hurriedly asked. "The description." "What does the description say?" A bit of tension sipped into his voice. Startled by this intensity, Cassie didn't ask the same question again and simply said. "You've been mesmerized by the ancient fiend, soul-devouring tree, and are being turned into its thrall. Once the process is complete, there will be no escape." As soon as Sonny heard these words, it was as though heavy chains fell from his mind. Suddenly, his memories returned in an avalanche, making him stagger. His eyes opened wide. Only now that he had fully recovered his memory did Sonny realize the extent to which his mental state was warped, how much of his true self was gone, how close he came to being completely obliterated without even knowing that a terrible monster was slowly devouring his mind. An extreme feeling of terror filled his heart. For a few moments, Sonny lost the ability to speak, covered in cold sweat and shaking. "See, calm down. Calm down. It didn't happen, you stopped it. You're back, it didn't eat you." Slowly, he was able to get a grip on his feelings and achieve some semblance of composure. He came very close to the edge, but did not take the last step. He was still himself. It wasn't over yet. They still had a chance. Looking at Cassie, Sunny slowly exhaled and said, "Thank you." The blind girl smiled and raised her eyebrows. For what? She had already forgotten all about their conversation. Sunny was free from being mesmerized by the soul devourer, by Cassie was not. Her memory, mind and thinking were still compromised. Turning worse as they spoke. A pained smile appeared on Sunny's face. Struggling to keep his tone light and cheerful, he said. "For helping me out just now. Sorry about waking you up so early, go back to sleep. I'll take it from here." Cassie hesitated for a few moments, then got distracted and forgot that he was there at all. Yawning, the blind girl lay down and covered herself with her cloak. Soon, she was asleep again, happy and blissfully ignorant of the fact that her days were numbered. Sunny watched her for a while, a grim expression on his face. Finally, he turned and walked away, thinking. Over my dead body. Chapter 87 Plan of Escape. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Nephice was still at the western edge of the island, gazing over the receding black waters. It seems as though she barely moved since the last time Sunny saw her. Looking at her with clear eyes, free from the most debilitating effects of being enthralled, he was able to notice things that he had not noticed before. Neff's hair was indeed longer. Back at the academy, it was short and usually parted to the side. Now silver strands were already long enough to cover her ears, hanging messily without their usual luster. Changing Star's face seemed much thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and a bleak, dull expression. Her usual confidence and energy were gone, replaced by exhausted stillness. She looked as though some unknown illness was consuming her from inside, slowly turning the once radiant girl into a pale shadow of her former self. Sunny suspected that he knew what that illness was. He had known for a long time that Nephice had a mysterious goal, and that her determination to achieve that goal was nothing short of frightening. That burning desire of hers, it seemed, was strong enough to resist even the enthrallment of the soul devourer. However, while the feelings remained, the actual memories were gone. Thus, Nephice had been left longing desperately for something that she did not know, with no way to understand the nature of her emotions or satiate them. This inner conflict was the reason for her terrible state. Coming closer, Sunny sat down and looked at Neff, wishing to see her striking gray eyes shine once again with unbreakable resolve. "Hey, Neff." She turned her head to him, not saying anything. Sunny gritted his teeth, feeling dark anger blossoming in his heart. "That loathsome tree. I have something to tell you." Trying to stay calm and not miss anything, he told Nephice everything that he had found out. He told her about his trip to the upper parts of the soul tree, the giant nest he had discovered, the vile thieving bird spawn and how he had killed it, the strange memory with no rank and type, the new attribute he had received and the hidden one he had accidentally discovered. Finally, Sunny told her about the nature of that attribute, the true nature of the soul devourer, how long they had been on the island, and what they had forgotten. When he finished, Changing Star's expression didn't change one bit. Looking away, she simply said, "I see." Sunny blinked. "I see. I see. That's all you have to say." She glanced at him and smiled darkly. "What do you want me to say?" He gaped at her and clenched his fists. "Wow. How horrible. Good job, Sunny. Say something, at least. Is it so hard to behave like a human?" She turned away, not answering. Sunny stared at her for several seconds, then said in a tired, defeated voice. "I don't know what to do." "Tell me what to do, Neff. How do I get us out of this?" She was silent for a while. Sunny almost assumed that Changing Star had already forgotten everything that he had told her, but then he noticed sparks of white radiance dancing in the depths of her eyes. Nephice had activated her aspect ability, using pain to stay lucid for as long as possible. Finally, she looked at the retreating dark sea and said. We need to build a boat. Sunny blinked. What? Changing Star sighed and turned her face to look at him. We've been here, on this island, for many weeks. Our minds are slowly being erased by the soul tree, turning us into its slaves. Forever. However, the process is not complete. He nodded, listening. What thoughts did the soul tree put in our heads? That it is benevolent and great. That its fruits are desirable. And that we shouldn't leave the island, staying as close to it as possible. The first two commands make perfect sense. The third, however, is not so simple. Nephi gestured at the vast expanse of black water. From that third command, we can deduce that the effect of the soul tree's enthrallment weakens with range. And that if we put enough distance between ourselves and the tree, it will be broken. Sunny's face brightened when he understood Neff's logic. So there was a way. They just had to leave the Ashen Barrow and flee, not looking back until the Soul Devourer's brand was gone from their souls. However. But why a boat? Why not just run away on foot? Changing Star lowered her head and said quietly. We'll never make it to the castle on foot. We'll just die. I was too arrogant before to think, well, it doesn't matter now. It will take many months to go around the crater through the labyrinth, especially now that we don't have the echo. And every day we spend there is another day we risk encountering something that will kill us without even breaking a sweat. She sighed. We were already lucky to survive for as long as we did. But in the end, no matter how much we fought and persevered, we still encountered the soul tree. This should have been our end. Do you know how improbable it is that we even got a chance to have this conversation? Sunny hesitantly shook his head. First, we had to have an oracle in our group to see the future. Then, Cassie had to formulate and execute an ingenious plan in the short amount of time her memory remained intact. That plan was based on the fact that there was someone with an awakened armor of 5th tier in our group, one enchanted with the extremely rare mind protection trait, no less. Awakened with the revelation affinity were few and far between. Sleepers with a memory equal to the puppeteer's shroud were even rarer. That person then had to find and kill a great devil. More incredibly, he had to receive an actual lineage memory from it. Do I need to explain how implausible this combination of events is? Sunny slowly shook his head. Nephi closed her eyes. My point is. If we go into the labyrinth, we will inevitably meet the next soul tree, and even if we miraculously manage to survive that encounter, there will be the next, and then the next. Sooner or later, we will die. She looked west, where the last remnants of the dark sea were disappearing beyond the horizon. But if we build a boat and use Cassie's staff to fill the sail with wind, maybe we'll be eaten by the dwellers of the depths, or maybe they won't pay us any attention at all. It's a gamble either way. Either we die, which is the same as returning to the labyrinth, or not. If we survive, we'll be able to travel 100, maybe even 200 kilometers in one night. More distance than we had covered so far. Sunny froze, stunned by that number. In all the weeks preceding their battle with the Carapace demon, they had traveled for no more than 100, maybe 150 kilometers from the giant knight statue. It was a considerable amount, especially because of how hard each step through the Crimson Labyrinth had been. To travel as much, perhaps even more in a single day, that would have been incredible. But sail, on the dark sea. Suddenly, he felt very cold and small. Chapter 88 Boat Builders. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Trying to gather his courage, Sunny looked into the distance and said in a raspy voice. You've seen the creatures that dwell under these waves. Do you really want to swim across them? Changing Star was silent for a few seconds, then sighed. We are damned either way, Sunny. What do we have to lose? She fell silent for a moment and grimaced, pale flames dancing in her eyes. Then, in a quiet voice, she added. We will not light any fires, relying on your eyes to guide us west. We will hope that Cassie's armor will protect us. Maybe it will be enough. Sunny glanced at Neff and asked. What's so special about Cassie's armor? She hesitated for a moment, then answered without looking at him. It's a Tier 6 awakened memory. One of its traits is to make the wearer less likely to draw the enemy's attention. While Sunny was digesting this information, Nephise suddenly trembled. Closing her eyes, she said through gritted teeth. I am at my limit. My mind is fading. If you have any questions left, better ask them fast. He blinked, startled. Then, knowing that there was not much time left, Sunny asked the first thing that came to his mind. Do you even know how to build a boat? Changing Star simply nodded, letting him know that she did. Her expression was slowly turning lost and dull again. Racing against time, Sunny frantically thought of another question. How do I convince you to leave the island once your memory is gone? Nephise looked at him, struggling to hold on to the last shreds of lucidity. For a moment, her eyes became clear again. White flames ignited in their depths, illuminating her pale, beautiful face. Aster. Song. Veil. Say those words to me, and I will listen. Starting to lose the grip on her thoughts, she turned away and added after a short pause, her voice steady and even. If anything happens, take Cassie and flee. Don't. Then, the light in her eyes slowly dimmed, and soon, Changing Star was staring west once again, all memory of their conversation gone from her mind. Sunny sat by her side for some time, waiting. After a while, he shifted a little and said. Hey, Neff. She turned to him, her face bleak and full of confusion. Sunny. Oh, when did you get here? A while ago. Then, he smiled and said in a carefree tone. Hey, can I ask you something? Do you know how to build a boat? Nephise was very surprised by his question, but eventually agreed to help him. Sunny didn't tell her why exactly he wanted to build a boat, dodging the questions with practiced finesse. His flaw was not making things easy, but with the state Neff was in, persuading her was not very hard. Manipulating her felt a little strange, but explaining everything once again would have taken too much time. Not to mention that he wasn't sure that it would work again. And there was not much time left. With every hour, their condition worsened. Even Sunny was having trouble keeping his lucidity intact. Every time he felt that his mind was beginning to slip, he had to inflict pain on himself to get a few moments of reprieve. Even so, his thoughts were slow and fragile. Keeping them together was taking a heavy toll on him. They had to flee the island as soon as possible. Sunny was determined to be ready by the time the Dark Sea returned. Turning away from Nephise to not let her see the pained expression on his face, Sunny bit his hand once again. Feeling the bitter taste of blood on his tongue, he let the wave of pain clear his mind and blinked, amused at the irony of the situation. He was gnawing on himself to prevent himself from being eaten. What a funny contradiction. Hiding his bleeding hand behind his back, Sunny turned to Neff and asked. So, how are we going to make the boat? She thought about it for some time, then said indifferently. We will have to use the materials at hand. For the hull, we will have to use the dead demon's carapace. We can strip several armor plates of suitable shape and tie them together with the golden rope. Sunny raised his eyebrows. The carapace demon's armor. It's made out of some strange steel. Can steel even float? Nephise glanced at him with reproach. Anything can float, Sunny. You just have to make sure that you're displacing more water than the weight of the floating object. That's how boats work. He blinked. Ah, okay. About the sail, I think we can ask Cassie to lend us her cloak. What do you think? Changing Star gave him a strange look. I mean, yes. I still don't understand what got you so excited about boat building, but I'm sure she'll be willing to help you out with this. passion project. Sunny smiled. Great. Let's go butcher the demon, then. A strange sentence to say with a smile, but not the strangest one he had to say to convince Neff to help him. A few minutes later, they reached the giant carcass of the carapace demon. It was towering above them like a small hill of polished metal. After that first day when the strange winged abominations had circled around the island for several hours, never daring to approach, nothing else had shown up to lay claim to the fearsome creature's meat. As the result, the carcass was largely intact. Strangely, the demon's corpse had not begun to rot. Only the metal of its carapace slowly deteriorated, losing its luster and shine, then turning less and less durable. By now, its surface was marred by large patches of rust. Nephis climbed up on top of the carcass and walked from side to side, looking under her feet. Then, she gestured at several spots. These curved plates will be perfect if we can fit them together tight enough. Each one is long enough to form the entirety of the hull, leaving enough space for the three of us to sit side by side. Sunny had no knowledge of shipbuilding, so he decided to trust her judgment. Looking up from the ground, he asked. What about the mast? Changing Star scowled. That I will have to think about. Sunny smiled. All right. While you're thinking, I'll go fetch Cassie to keep you company. Chapter 89 Demons Bones. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 89 Demons Bones. Sunny had a lot to do before the sunset. The parts of the plan spun in his head, making it ache. He had to constantly remain focused, straining his will to its limits, just to keep himself from forgetting everything. When it was not enough, he had to use pain to augment his concentration. His hands and arms were covered in ghastly bite marks. Without the blood weave, Sunny might have fainted from blood loss already. Still, with his pale face turning even whiter from exhaustion and feverish light burning in his eyes, he must have looked like a zombie. Luckily, Cassie couldn't see any of it. It didn't take much to convince her to join their strange endeavor. The blind girl's state was way worse than his or Neff's. She seemed to be barely holding on, her thoughts slow and meek. Sunny's heart was gripped with worry. Why is she affected so much more than us? Is it because we have true names, but she does not? Names were anchors of one's sense of self, after all. Could it be that true names served a similar role, only in matters having to do with the spell? He didn't know. Sunny guided Cassie to the carcass of the carapace demon. Nephis was already busy stripping plates of armor from its back. Her silver sword was seemingly able to cut through the deteriorated metal, making the task not as hard as he had been afraid of. Gently sitting the blind girl down in a spot where Neff could see her, he climbed atop the dead demon and evaluated the progress of Changing Star's work. She looked at him with a frown. Aren't you going to help? This was your idea, after all. Sunny shrugged. Maybe later. You seem to be enjoying yourself, anyway. Some people might say that it's a fun little project to chase the boredom away, right? She blinked a couple of times, then said. I guess. Sunny nodded a couple of times, looking down at the spots where, stripped of armor plates, the demon's flesh was laid bare. The azure blood had coagulated, turning it dark and as hard as stone. Here and there, though, white layers of fat remained in pristine condition. Actually, I have another project in mind. Nephis raised an eyebrow. Oh really? Sunny summoned his sword and stepped closer to the gap in the creature's armor. Yeah. I want to make a candle. Saying those words, he began to cut, separating the fat from the hardened muscle tissue. Neff blinked a few times and then looked at Cassie. Hey, Cass. Has Sunny lost his mind? The blind girl perked up at the sound of her name. I'm not sure. I think he's just bored. Sunny concentrated on his task, not paying them any attention. For a moment, he entertained the idea of cutting himself with the Midnight Shard's razor-sharp blade, but then dismissed it. Cutting through the puppeteer's shroud would have been really hard, and he couldn't dismiss the armor in front of the girls. Well, to be more precise, he didn't want to. With a sizable chunk of the demon's fat in his hands, Sunny jumped down from the carcass and landed on a pile of fallen leaves. Making a candle out of animal fat was not very hard. He just needed fire, water, and time. The wick could be made out of seaweed fibers. It was not going to be pretty, but he didn't care about aesthetics. Leaving Nephice and Cassie behind, Sunny rushed back to their camp. The sun was already high in the sky. He spent the rest of the day doing two things. Watching over the process of making the candle and running around the island, gathering as much fallen leaves as he could. From time to time, he would catch a glimpse of Nephice working on the boat, sometimes instructing Cassie to help her with menial tasks. From what he could see, the boat was coming along nicely. Changing Star knew what she was doing. Of course, this was only possible because he had convinced her that this was just something he wanted to do for fun. The girls knew that Sunny was planning to use the boat to escape the Ashen Barrow. The effects of enthrallment would have kept erasing their memories of the task, making finishing it impossible. As it stood, Sunny was the only one who knew the true purpose of the boat. That's why he was forced to bear the full weight of Soul Tree's mind corruption alone. He felt as though he was about to drop dead of exhaustion. His head felt like it was filled with molten iron. His vision was starting to become blurry. But, stubbornly, Sunny refused to give up. No matter how tired he was, how much he wanted to let go and ease this suffering, returning to the bliss of not knowing, he kept his thoughts on one goal, and one goal only. Escaping the clutches of the Soul Devourer. Finally, with the evening approaching, the boat was ready. Looking like a walking corpse, Sunny slowly approached the demon's carcass, which was now cut open and sliced apart. It was as though a mad vivisector had visited the island to perform an autopsy on the giant and forgot to sew the poor creature back up. Nephice looked at him with concern. "Sunny, are you all right?" Giving her a crooked smile, he shrugged. "I'm fine." Comparatively, he did not specify what exactly he was comparing his current condition to. Turning his head, Sunny looked at the boat with dark satisfaction. It was not how he had imagined it. The hull was made out of curved plates of polished metal, with sharp spikes protruding from them in all directions. The plates were held together by the golden rope that was tied tightly around them. Changing Star had managed to make the gaps between the different parts of the hull so thin that no water could sip through. The mast was made out of the demon's spine and ribs, with Cassie's enchanted cloak hanged on them to serve as the sail. There was even a steering oar, fashioned out of the tip of the giant's scythe. He had expected to see a makeshift raft, but what met him was an actual vessel. Yes, it looked crude, but also strong, eerily macabre, and strangely impressive. Sailing upon the cursed sea on a boat made of demon bones, sound like the beginning of a legend, he thought, temporarily mesmerized by the ghastly visage of the carapace vessel. Nephice looked at him with a hint of satisfaction. Happy. Now what? Sunny gathered his thoughts. Now. As soon as he tried to think of what they had to do next, an invisible barrier appeared in his mind, blocking any attempt to continue that thought. Now No matter how hard he tried, Sunny couldn't quite remember what he wanted to do. With a scowl, he raised his hand and bit down on his mangled palm, feeling drops of blood flowing into his mouth. But even that pain did not help him destroy the barrier. Sunny smiled darkly and kneeled, placing his hand on the ground. Summoning the Midnight Shard, he raised his other hand and brought the pommel of the sword down without any hesitation. As the brittle bones of his ring finger shattered from the powerful strike, a wave of agony washed over his mind, obliterating the adamantine barrier. Now we get the hell out of here. Chapter 90 Nightfall. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Nephi stared at Sunny, shocked by his sudden act of self-mutilation. Hissing through gritted teeth, he dismissed the midnight shard and slowly rose back to his feet. Ah! Crap! That really hurts. His poor finger was red and swollen, pulsating with sharp pain. It was unmistakably broken. Sunny was so full of self-pity that he wanted to cry. Why am I so unlucky? First that nightmare in the nest, now this. How come no one else is suffering, just me? He conveniently decided to forget that Changing Star had been literally torturing herself for weeks and that due to her blindness Cassie was always covered in bruises. Hearing his pained voice, the blind girl turned her head and asked. Sunny. What happened? He grimaced and tried to smile. Ah, it's nothing serious, really. I just, sort of, smashed my hand a bit. Nephise opened her mouth to say something, but he hurriedly interrupted whatever she wanted to say. Anyway, Neph. Can you help me drag this gruesome masterpiece of yours to the edge of the island? At this point, one wrong question could make things very complicated. He didn't want to reveal the true purpose of his actions until the last moment. That way, he would have more leeway in how to deal with problems, should any arise. Changing Star hesitated. A few seconds later, she shrugged, looking at him with a concerned frown. Are you sure you're okay, Sunny? He forced a smile. I will be if you help me. Giving up, she shook her head and walked over to the front of the boat. Sunny turned to Cassie. We're off, Cass. Wait here for a bit, all right. I'll come get you soon. She lingered, as though not quite understanding his words, then answered with an uncertain expression. Okay. Sunny raised his healthy hand to grip her shoulder, then hesitated and turned away with a dark look in his eyes. Enduring the pain, he walked toward the boat. Hold on a little more, Cassie. It will be over soon, I promise. The night was already approaching. Sunny and Nephise dragged the boat across the island, pulling it as oxen yoked to a wagon. The ashen sand was not the most difficult of terrains, but the spikes on the strange vessel's hull were making the task harder. Thankfully, the boat was lighter than it looked. Sunny knew that the alloy of the demon's carapace was extremely light from his experience with the midnight shard, which was forged from the same lustrous metal. If he were to believe the sword's description, this miraculous alloy came from a shard of a fallen star. Whether this omen was good or bad, he didn't know. Soon, they heard a thundering rumble in the distance. It came from the direction of the colossal crater. The dark sea was awakening. Gritting his teeth, Sunny grabbed onto the golden rope that was coiled around his chest and pulled harder. Come on. Faster. The sun was just about to touch the horizon when they finally reached the edge of the island. Falling to his knees, Sunny released the rope and gasped for air, his chest rising and falling frantically. A wave of overwhelming exhaustion was drowning his senses, making it hard to stay awake. Not yet, you can't let go yet. Nephise was silent, looking at him with a frown. For once, Sunny felt glad that she was weirdly taciturn by nature. Gathering his strength, he stood up and glanced at the darkening sky. Time was running out. Turning to Neph, he strained his parched throat and said in a raspy voice. I'll explain everything once Cassie is here. Don't go anywhere until I bring her, all right? Please. Changing Star stared at him for a few seconds, then shrugged with indifference and didn't say anything. I'll take it as a yes. What else could he do? Cursing under his breath, Sunny turned around and hurried away. He had one last task to accomplish before returning for Cassie. Some time later, he came back to the spot where he had left Cassie. The blind girl was still there, sitting some distance away from the carapace demon's carcass and idly staring into the ground. Hearing the sound of his approaching footsteps, she smiled weakly. Sunny. He walked over, tired to the bone, and said while trying to keep his tone casual. Yeah. It's me. Cassie got distracted for a moment, then asked. Do you have a fruit? I'm hungry. He flinched, then shook his head. No. Listen, we need to. That I'm hungry. Do you have a fruit? Sunny stopped, looking at the blind girl with a forlorn expression. She sounded like a broken doll, repeating the same phrase over and over. Her condition wasn't good. He licked his lips. Come with me, and your hunger will disappear. This was the best misdirection he could come up with within the confines of his flaw. However, this time, he failed to achieve the desired effect. Cassie smiled and said. Really? You'll take me to the fruits. Due to his exhaustion and the debilitating effect of the enthrallment, Sunny got distracted for a moment and failed to control the flaw. Without realizing it, he opened his mouth and said. No. Cassie pouted and lowered her head. That's not nice, Sunny. Why did you lie to me? Still reeling from his mistake, Sunny missed the moment and made things even worse, turning a small oversight into a real problem. Because I want to take you away from this cursed island. As soon as the words left his mouth, Sunny froze and opened his eyes wide, refusing to believe that he had just messed up that bad. However, the damage was already done. Cassie turned to him with a deep scowl. Take me away. But I don't want to leave. Why would I leave the soul tree? Sunny silently cursed and shouted, abandoning any attempt to control himself. Because that thing is evil. It's pure goddamn nightmare. Come on, let's go. Grabbing her hand, he tried to pull the delicate girl away, but she resisted with surprising strength. Let go of me, you jerk. Cassie managed to rip her hand away from his grip and flinched back, looking at Sunny with anger. I said I don't want to go. You're acting strange, Sunny. Stop, please. Sunny froze, not knowing what to do. This island is our home. It's so nice here, with the three of us together. Why do you want to leave? He lingered, struggling to do what he knew had to be done. Finally, Sunny gritted his teeth and said. Because it's 5. Remember. I'm sorry, Cassie. Then, he lunged forward and violently grabbed the blind girl, easily suppressing her resistance. What are you doing? Stop. Help. Help. Neff. Throwing her over his shoulder, Sunny turned around and ran toward the edge of the island. Cassie resisted desperately, using her small fists to pummel his back with a rain of punches. Despite the fact that she had never taken part in battles against the nightmare creatures of the Forgotten Shore, she still was considerably stronger than a normal person. All those soul shards Changing Star had shared with her gave Cassie enough strength to make Sunny feel every strike. It wasn't enough to seriously injure him, but more than enough to hurt like hell. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, Cassie. Deeply disturbed, Sunny tried to block out Cassie's desperate screams and rushed to the boat. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. As the last glimmers of light were disappearing from the sky, he finally returned to the edge of the island. The ghastly boat was silently standing on the sand, just a few meters away from the restless black water. Changing Star was resting just in front of it, raising her head to look at the source of the commotion. Neff. Help. Sunny had gone crazy. Nephi slowly rose to her feet, her indifferent expression radiating coldness. She slightly outstretched one hand. Crap. Wait. It's not. Before he could finish the sentence, the silver sword appeared out of thin air, aimed at the ground. For now. Explain yourself. Changing Star's voice was even and calm, but Sunny could feel the hidden threat in it. Suddenly, he saw her in a new light, or, rather, in an old one. As a potential enemy. The idea of facing off against Nephi sent chills running down his spine. He had almost forgotten the feeling he got back in the academy, watching her wipe the floor with most of the sleepers in their batch. He had forgotten that she, too, was a monster.